I almost threw a party when I heard about the first XRP ETF launching, finally, right? But then I dug into the details and my excitement kind of turned into one big, wait, what? There's a twist here that this story that maybe nobody's actually talking about, and it changes everything for XRP holders like us. Now, I'm an XRP holder, maybe like you. When news broke that an XRP exchange-traded fund was set to go live in the United States, I kind of felt like we'd finally hit the crypto lottery. Let's think about it. An XRP ETF means that you could invest in XRP through a normal stock account. No more fumbling with secret wallets or seed phrases. Just click buy in your brokerage and boom, you've got XRP exposure. So it's kind of like XRP was about to get a VIP pass to Wall Street. I was stoked, I'm not gonna lie, picturing all of the new investors just piling on in. The price per XRP maybe getting a nice boost. And finally, some validation that, hey, XRP is legit in the big leagues, right? I was literally doing a little happy dance in my living room. But here's the thing. Almost immediately, I started seeing people online scratching their heads. And wait a second, they said, is this even a real spot ETF or some kind of trick? And I'm thinking, a trick? This is the REX Osprey XRP ETF that we're talking about. It sounded pretty spottish from the headlines. So of course, my curiosity shot through the roof. I had to find out what was really going on with this shiny new XRP fund. And buckle up, because I went deep down that rabbit hole on this one. So I grabbed a coffee this morning, or a Red Bull as you can see, and I started devouring every little bit of info on this ETF. And it's officially called the REX Osprey XRP ETF. Kind of a mouthful, but remember that name. The basics sounded pretty awesome. It aims to give investors regulated, hassle-free exposure to XRP's price. No more dealing with the wild west of crypto exchanges if you don't want to. Just a nice, clean stock market product. For XRP holders like us, it's pretty huge. It could mean more demand for XRP, since the fund would have to buy XRP, and a stamp of approval that our token isn't some kind of black sheep. After all the drama with the SEC lawsuit, an ETF kind of felt like a clear win. But then I noticed something odd in the fine print. This ETF wasn't following the usual playbook for a spot crypto fund. See, typically, if you want to launch a spot ETF, meaning the fund holds the actual asset, real XRP tokens in this case, then you file under the Securities Act of 1933. That's how you ask the SEC, hey, can we make a fund that directly holds crypto? And so far, the SEC hasn't been too eager to say yes to those for assets, or at least other than assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And of course, certainly not XRP. So, however, REX and Osprey, they took a totally different route. They filed this fund under an Investment Company Act of 1940. Now, if you're not a finance regulation nerd, that might sound like a trivial little detail, but it's actually a clue that something is up. Why? Because several crypto ETFs that use futures instead of holding coins directly have been approved via this 1940s Act loophole. That law lets a fund launch automatically after 75 days if the SEC doesn't object. And guess what? The SEC kept quiet for 75 days. No objections, no delays, so this XRP ETF was basically free to launch by default. Pretty sneaky, right? Well, they kind of slipped in through the side door rather than actually asking via the front door. So at this point, I'm thinking, hold on. If they use that futures-friendly route, does this thing even hold XRP coins at all? Or is it some kind of derivative thing that just tracks XRP's price? And the crypto community chatter was all over the place here. Some people were hyped. ETF means XRP to the moon. You know how that goes. But others were super skeptical. Even in our own Discord server, by the way, if you haven't joined, it's a free educational Discord server and the link is in the description down below. It's a chill place to talk crypto and ask questions. People were debating this on, well, at least to death, I should say. Now, one person was like, there's no way this is a true spot ETF if it's under the 1940s Act. It's probably holding futures or some kind of swap, not actual XRP. And I'm sitting there kind of reading this, scratching my head, going, why would they do it this way, if it wasn't mostly legit? I mean, launching an XRP fund only to have it not really hold XRP would be a pretty weird move, right? So I dug deeper. And by dug, I mean I went on a full-on internet scavenger hunt. We're talking Twitter, Reddit, random finance blogs, the works. And I wanted the real scoop. That's when I stumbled on a breakdown by someone in the XRP community that we all know and trust, Crypto Eri. Now, if you're on crypto Twitter, you probably have seen Eri's posts, right? She has always got the details before anyone else. And sure enough, she had the inside track on this ETF's structure. What she revealed made my jaw drop just a bit. This REX/Osprey or REX Osprey XRP ETF is kind of a Frankenstein of a fund. It's part spot, part something else. According to Eri, at least 80% of this ETF's assets will be directly invested in XRP. Yep, actual XRP tokens. The real deal, right? That means the core of this fund does hold XRP in custody on behalf of investors. So when I heard that 80%, I was like, okay, that's a pretty solid majority. If the fund is a big hit, then say $100 million flows into it, at least $80 million of that would be going to buy XRP on the open market. That's significant. It would be like having a whale constantly buying XRP for the fund as people kind of invest. So that makes sense. This is spot. Investors are at least getting genuine exposure to XRP's price because the fund is largely buying and holding XRP. But the other part of Eri's breakdown is where things get interesting. Up to 25% of the fund's assets will be invested via a Cayman Islands subsidiary, something that they're calling the REX Osprey XRP Portfolio SP. Now, why on earth would they route a quarter of the fund through an offshore entity in the Caymans? It sounded a little bit sketchy at first, blush, but at least first blush, I should say. But it actually comes down to the US regulations and taxes. US investment funds, especially those under the 1940s Act, have to follow certain rules to qualify as a regulated investment company. There are limits on holding things like commodities or certain derivatives directly, and there are tax implications too. So a common trick is to use a separate offshore vehicle for the stuff that the main fund can't hold directly. In this case, that likely means that if the funds were, at least wants to use XRP futures or other derivatives to juice its exposure or manage its inflows, but it can do that in the Caymans sub without Uncle Sam wagging a finger. Pretty clever, even though it sounds like financial engineering. Essentially, the Caymans piece lets them kind of include things that the US fund otherwise just couldn't easily include. Like maybe leveraged exposure, or just staying within certain, diversification limits by technical outsourcing, some of its assets to that sub-fund. Now, what about the remaining little sliver of the portfolio then, the other 5%? Now, Eri noted that the rest would be spread across money market funds, US Treasuries, cash equivalents, and possibly a smidge of other crypto-related investments like XRP futures or even Bitcoin Ethereum ETFs. So in plain English, that means that they're going to be keeping a little cash or cash-like stuff on hand, probably for liquidity or to handle redemption smoothly. And they might hold some other assets to kind of round things out. I even saw mention that they could hold a little bit of Bitcoin or Ethereum ETF exposure. The key point here is that while the fund is indeed, would indeed hold XRP directly at its core, it's not going to be 100% XRP sitting in cold storage. there are these other ingredients in the mix, a dash of treasuries, a sprinkles of derivatives, and maybe even a pinch of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I'm aware that I said 80% XRP earlier, 25% in the offshore, and an additional 5% in others. That doesn't add up to 100%, does it? So, putting all of this together, the REX Osprey ETF is mostly a spot XRP ETF, but not purely so. This is a cocktail, mostly one spirit with a couple of other mixers thrown on in. One analogy is that imagine you're ordering a kind of burger expecting 100% beef, but then you learn that actually it's like 70% beef, maybe it's 30% soy filler, right? It's still a burger, it still tastes mostly like beef, but you know that it's not the purest patty. Now that's basically what we've got here. In fact, a buddy of mine jokingly kind of called this XRP ETF Lite. You know, like those light beers that are maybe only 70% of the taste with fewer calories. It's the light beer version of a spot ETF. You get most of the real thing, and most people probably even noticed or won't even notice the difference. But the purists, we might actually just wrinkle our noses up just a bit. Now, let me kind of talk about how I feel about this as an XRP holder who has been dying to see an ETF. Honestly, I'm a bit torn. On one hand, 70% actual XRP is a pretty big deal. If this fund takes off, that is. It could, suck up a fair amount of XRP off the open market to hold in custody. That could create some positive price pressure over time. And beyond price, well, it's visibility and legitimacy. There are plenty of investors, even some of my own friends and family, who just will not touch crypto directly, right? Now, they're not going to make a wallet. They're not going to deal with an exchange that isn't, Charles Schwab's or Fidelity. And they definitely don't want to worry about losing their keys. But as an ETF, though they understand ETFs, they can trust ETFs. So this opens the door for those people to finally get exposure to XRP. That's bullish for adoption. Now, I remember feeling pretty jealous when Bitcoin got its futures ETFs, and then Ethereum got one too. And here we are, with XRP stuck in that kind of, or at least was stuck in that lawsuit limbo for a while. So the very fact that we have XRP and ETF in the same sentence now is pretty decent, and launching in the US market nonetheless. It's a little bit of a vindication, I guess, moment. Like, we're back, baby. On the other hand, it's not exactly the product that I imagined. Now, in the perfect world, we would get an SEC-approved, straight-up spot XRP ETF that holds 100% XRP in a vault with a custodian. That's the dream, right? Every share of the ETF directly corresponds to some XRP taken off of the market and held for investors. The REX Osprey fund is close to that, but the existence of that Cayman's subsidiary and the kind of wiggle room for futures and other assets makes me a tad uneasy, right? It introduces a bit more complexity and probably a lot more risk. For example, futures contracts need rolling. They can deviate from spot prices significantly, and they can involve counterparties. It's not a huge deal at least at the scale of just 20% or 30%, but of the kind of fund, but it is there. And just the fact that they had to go this route using a 1940s Act fund and these extra kind of components tells you that the regulatory environment is still not welcoming true, at least spot crypto ETFs with open arms. They had to get creative to make this thing happen. Now, I suspect that the reason that they did this, or at least did it this way, kind of boils down to pragmatism, right? By using the 1940 Act, they actually found a path of least resistance. No need to wait for the SEC to explicitly kind of bless a spot XRP ETF. Instead, they can set up a format that the SEC has allowed for other stuff and just let it go effectively useless unless someone actually objects. Right? Now, since no one objected here, right, we are, right? Part of me kind of goes, bravo, well played. Another part of me goes, why couldn't you just do it the normal way and have a clean, straightforward product? But hey, beggars, I guess, can't be choosers. So at this juncture in my research, I had to remind myself. And this one might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, we had to get that out of the way. You kind of know the drill. But let's get back to the story. This REX Osprey ETF is launching as we speak. But here is the wild part. It's not launching in isolation. In fact, it's kind of like the opening act for what could be an even bigger show coming. Right? The SEC, yes, the very same SEC that basically let this fund go live by not objecting, is currently evaluating a whole bunch of other applications for other crypto ETFs, 92 on the last count. And many of those are spot ETFs under the regular 1933 Act route. Now we're talking big name asset managers and exchanges have filed proposals for spot Bitcoin ETFs, Ethereum ETFs, and of course, yes, spot XRP ETFs. There's talk by mid-October that the SEC might finally give the green light to some of these. In particular, rumor has it that at least one spot XRP ETF could get approved. Now, I saw on Polymarkets that bettors are actually putting something like a 93% chance on a spot XRP ETF approval by next month. 93%. Now, nothing is a sure thing until it happens, right? The SEC could always throw some curveballs out there, or delays even, but the sentiment is super bullish that the real spot ETFs are coming. So just imagine that scenario, right? In a few weeks or maybe a month, right? We might actually have another XRP ETF, one that is arguably the full fat version. Now, where does that leave our REX Osprey ETF? Well, it'll be really interesting to see. On one hand, REX Osprey has first mover advantage, sort of, I guess. You know, they're out of the gate, at least first, which means that they can attract assets and traders early on. Sometimes being first is half of the battle in the ETF world, or maybe even in crypto. I mean, take a look at Ethereum, right? Still has outrageous issues going on, yet first mover advantage, it puts it there. I mean, it took a while for Yahoo to be dethroned by Google, right? And of course, on the other hand, it is a more straightforward spot XRP ETF, or at least if one does come out, you know, some investors might just prefer it for its simplicity and perhaps lower management fees. Now, we don't have all of those details yet, but I'm definitely going to be watching this space closely. And as for us XRP enthusiasts, this kind of win-win in a weird way, right? Worst case, none of the other spot ETFs get approved soon. But hey, we still have this REX Osprey hybrid Frankenstein fund to at least kind of bring XRP to traditional investors. Best case scenario, this REX Osprey fund kind of proves the concept and warms up regulators. And then the floodgates do truly open for more crypto ETFs, opening a pure XRP one, right? At least including a pure XRP one. Now, in any case, XRP is making strides here, right? A year or two ago, we would have probably thought, you know, this would never have happened. We were in the middle of a lawsuit, the uncertainty, exchanges were delisting XRP left, right, and center across the US. Things kind of looked bleak. You can fast forward now, Ripple wins partial victories, we have dismissals of cases and appeals, XRP gets relisted on exchanges, and now an ETF is launching. It's kind of like a comeback story, and I'm here for it. Now, before I continue, I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's been supporting this channel. You guys are the real MVPs. Now, if you're looking for a way to support, you know, what I do here, and, you know, you happen to need a good old platform for trading or investing in crypto, then check out Blowfin or BitGet. I've got affiliate links in the descriptions down below. Using those links, like signing up and trading on those platforms using those links, actually supports the channel, and it's completely free, no extra costs to you guys. Now, it's totally optional, but it does genuinely help me keep these kind of deep dives coming. And hey, even if you're not looking for a new exchange, just hitting the like button or even dropping a comment down below with your thoughts is awesome. All right, so those are the plugs, they're over. Let's get back to the regular program. Now, where were we? Yes, my personal verdict on this whole REX Osprey XRP ETF situation. The bottom line, it's good. but it's not as good as a true spot ETF would actually be. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm happy that it exists. This makes life easier for a lot of investors and adds credibility to XRP, but it does so with a bit of a compromise. We've got, only really 70% of what we wanted. And that last kind of 30% is the compromise we've had to accept to get this thing launched now instead of, I don't know, a month from now. So as an XRP holder, I'll take it, of course. Progress is progress. If a year ago you told me, hey, in late 2025, there will be an XRP ETF trading in the United States, well, I would have been thrilled and a bit amazed. And here we are. However, I'm also keeping some champagne, I guess, on ice for the day that a fully backed spot XRP ETF is approved, because that's the true end game in my mind. That is when every share equals XRP locked up. And theoretically, that could have an even more direct impact on the market. Plus, it would be a sign that regulators finally get on board with treating crypto like other assets in the ETF space. Now, there's one more thing to consider. How will this ETF actually perform in terms of attracting investors and affecting XRP's price? Now, we have to manage our expectations here. Just because an ETF exists doesn't mean that billions of dollars are going to flow into it overnight. It might take a while. It might start off small. Heck, the very first Bitcoin futures ETF, for example, it launched with a bang, but some other crypto ETFs, that have come out have been kind of slow to get going. Right now, we're going to see some data in the coming weeks for sure, like how much volume it actually trades, like how many assets it actually has accumulated. Now, if it's a hit, that's going to be a great sign that that was kind of pent up demand for this thing. And if it's slow to gain traction, then maybe the market's waiting for the full spot version or just not that interested. Either way, it's going to be fascinating to watch this. I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on it, and I'm going to report back on what happens. So to my fellow XRP holders out there, what a time to be alive, huh? Right, we've been through the ringer, right? And now things are looking up. This ETF might not be perfect, but it is a milestone. It's one more brick in the road to mainstream adoption, and maybe it's even a catalyst, right? If the SEC sees that an XRP kind of fund, can operate without the world ending, then maybe they actually get more comfortable approving the straight up spot ETFs. Maybe, just maybe, right? But I won't be holding my breath on the SEC doing anything quickly. But of course, one can hope. And at the end of the day, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to say it. At the end of the day, right? But it is at the end of the day, and this is the end of the video, right? I'm feeling cautiously optimistic, right? We've got an ETF, not exactly the way that we imagined it, but it is here. Now let's celebrate the win. Keep an eye on the challenges and continue to push for what's best for this community and the technology. Right? XRP isn't just surviving here, it's adapting and it's thriving in new ways. All right, so I've rambled on probably long enough. Now I want to hear from you guys. Are you going to buy shares of this new ETF? Would you rather just buy XRP directly, or are you waiting for a different fund to come along? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because this is a conversation and I'm super curious what the sentiment is like out there. So if you've enjoyed coming along on this little XRP adventure with me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the next video that's queuing up over there. And there's always plenty more to talk about in the world of crypto. So you don't want to miss anything that happens next. I will catch you all in the next one.